We'd only lived in the neighborhoods for 3 months when this took place. It was one of those new build communities, those houses that looked exactly alike, fresh sod, curving sidewalks, and plastic playgrounds. Safe, clean, and predictable. That's what we wanted when Nico and I finally left the city. Something slower, something that felt more stable. And for a while, that's exactly what it was. He would work these long hours for a tech company downtown, something to do with microchips and firmware that I never truly understood. And I stayed home with our kids. Devin, who was 6, and Maddie, who was barely even walking. It was our schedule, and he would leave at the crack of dawn and then come home just in time to eat and hang out for a little bit before we had to go to bed. And I would really just handle the rest of it. Most of the mornings, I would walk Devin to school. It was only 3 blocks, and a straight shot past rows and rows of mailbox clusters, and then, of course, sleepy moms juggling their morning coffee mugs. We'd stop and count squirrels or talk about Minecraft mobs. Then I'd drop him off at the crosswalk, give him a kiss, and push Maddie back home in the stroller. It was my routine, and it gave me this sense of structure when the rest of the world was just diapers, snacks, and the low hum of cartoons. We hadn't made many friends out here yet. A few neighbors waved when they saw me, and there were some other moms that I'd chat with in the mornings, but nothing deeper than that. And that was okay. I wasn't really looking for a new best friend, you know? I just wanted my kids to be safe and my house to be quiet. Looking back now, I think that's what made me a target. I was very easy to overlook, and I wasn't plugged into the gossip or the inner circles out here. I didn't know what faces belonged and which didn't. I didn't have the instincts yet. That radar that tells you something's wrong well before it actually is. And that's honestly how I ended up talking to him. A guy by the school drop-off line, leaning against the chain link fence with this dad-like posture and a smile that didn't set off any alarms in my head. He said his name was JR. He had a daughter in 2nd grade. That, small town small talk, surface level stuff. And I didn't question it because why would I? We were surrounded by other parents, teachers, and other kids. It was literally the safest place in the world. The next few mornings, there's JR again, same spot, leaning against the fence like it belonged to him. We'd nod at each other, share a comment about the weather or how chaotic the parking lot was that morning. He just had that sort of easy charm about him, like I could trust him. Said he used to work in HVAC and joked that his daughter bossed him around like she actually owned the place. I laughed because I didn't want to be rude. After a few days of this, he began calling me by my first name. "Hey, morning Daisy," he'd say with this little wave. "You're a trooper, out here every day, huh?" I smiled back but didn't really respond. Something about him felt a little too familiar far too quickly, like he skipped a few social steps. I brushed it off. It was daylight. There's people around. I didn't want to be that kind of person who assumed the worst in others, you know? Now, this all changed the following week. Monday morning, my phone buzzed with the school-wide email. The subject line punched me straight in the chest. "Safety alert, suspicious individual." I opened the email, and the school was warning parents about a man loitering near the campus, somebody who didn't even have a child enrolled in the school. They attached a photo taken from one of the teachers. It was blurry, but clear enough, and I caught my breath. It was JR. Same ratty brown jacket, same half-assed smile. I felt cold all over, and my stomach turned. I stared at the screen for a long time before calling Nico at work, and he picked up on the second ring. "Babe, I need to stop walking Devin to school," I told him.
"What? Why?"
I explained the situation, the emails and the photo, and of course, JR.
"Jesus,"
Nico muttered.
"All right, well, no more walking to school. Just use the car. Play it safe, okay? I'll talk to the school too."
I nodded even though he couldn't see me. My hands were slightly shaking. That afternoon, after I picked Devin up, I called the school and told them about everything, my conversations with JR and what he said about having a daughter and how often I'd see him there. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and the woman's voice dropped. "That's the first time we've heard an actual name. Thank you for telling us. This could hopefully really help." I hung up feeling sick and used. I've been giving this guy breadcrumbs without even realizing it. A smile here, a name there, enough for somebody twisted to stitch together a fantasy. Not 10 minutes later, I glanced up and out the living room window while bouncing Maddie on my hip. Somebody just walked past my house. I froze. It was quick, a silhouette was all I saw. A jacket, baseball cap, wide shoulders. I leaned in to take a better look, but they'd already turned the corner. Was it him? No, it couldn't be, could it? I reminded myself there's no way, and I just thought it was my paranoia, my active imagination, that I'm overly jumpy now. There's plenty of guys that look like that or dress like that, but the hairs on my arms told a completely different story. For the next few weeks, I stuck to my car, parking in the drop-off zone, avoided eye contact, and kept my head down. No JR, no weird run-ins, and the school said the man hadn't been spotted again, at least not officially. Nobody had seen him hanging around. It was almost like he disappeared. Now, that should have been relief, right? But it wasn't. Somehow, it made it worse because deep down, I really didn't believe that he was truly gone. By the third week, I was itching to walk again. I missed that fresh air and that little routine that Devin and I had. Other moms were still doing it, chatting together in their activewear, sipping at coffees while their kids darted around them. I almost felt like I was punishing myself for somebody else's sickness. So one morning, I just made the decision. It's just one day. I'll do a trial run, so to speak. I strapped Maddie into the stroller and laced up my shoes and told Devin that we're walking again today. He cheered like I just handed him a bowl of ice cream. The walk itself to school was pretty normal, peaceful even. I chatted with a few other moms at the gates and laughed about the absurdity of first grade homework. When JR's name came up, I played dumb. One woman said that she hadn't seen him in weeks. "That creep probably got scared off," she said, like it was already over. Now, on the way back home, the streets were quieter. A lot of the parents had driven, so once the drop-off rush ended, the neighborhood kind of emptied out like a drained pool. I'd say about halfway home, I realized just how alone I was out here. And when I looked behind me, there he was, JR. A block back, maybe even less, hat pulled low, same brown jacket. He wasn't even trying to hide, he was just there, walking, too casual to be a coincidence. I pushed the stroller faster, now began sweating. I didn't want to spook Maddie, but I kept looking over my shoulder. He was gaining ground. It was obvious. Then, out of nowhere, he just ducks behind this trash bin. Poof, gone. I stopped and listened. My ears roared with the silence now surrounding me. The wind rattled a nearby tree. I swore I could hear breathing that was not mine, just inches away. Then, his voice, right behind me. Hey, wait! He stepped out from a bush 30 feet back, waving like we're old friends. I screamed, and Maddie started crying, and I ran. My legs felt like anchors, the stroller wobbling on the uneven sidewalk. I turned onto Maple Court, one of the only houses that I recognized, the Dawsons. I didn't even hesitate. I bolted up their porch and slammed my palm against the doorbell. "Help, please!" I heard him from behind me. His footsteps were fast now. No more pretending. I turned and he was gaining closer, eyes wild. That smile was no longer on his face. I was cornered. I had nowhere to go. I banged on the door, but I already knew that there was nobody home. And then, click. The doorbell camera chirped to life, and a voice crackled from the speaker.
"Hey, it's Vinny. What the hell's going on?"
I was sobbing. "He's chasing me. Please call the police." Vinny didn't miss a beat.
"Already on it. Just hang tight. They're on their way."
I looked up and JR had stopped cold. We locked eyes. He knew that he'd been seen now. He turned and bolted. Poof, just like that, he was gone again. The cops arrived less than 10 minutes later, lights off but urgently. I was still on the Dawson's porch, hugging Maddie to my chest while she whimpered against my shoulder. One officer escorted me inside while the other circled the neighborhood, but JR, of course, was long gone. Just like that. The cruiser drove slow laps around the block, checking yards and alleyways, garages, anywhere a person might squeeze into, but nothing. I gave them everything I could. His description, the timeline, how long I'd been seeing him at school, and the name that he gave me. They asked me again if I was sure about the name, and I told them it's what he gave me. That's the sickest part, at least to me, that he wanted to know me or wanted me to think that I did. They ended up walking me back home once the scene was clear, cruisers sweeping slowly ahead and behind us like I was a president or something. Nico ended up coming home early that day, and I didn't ask if he had to argue with his boss about it. He just held me for a long time in the kitchen while Maddie napped and Devin watched TV, without even understanding that his mom had just outrun some kind of real, true evil. The cops, I don't think they ever really found JR, at least not really. But in the woods near the end of our street, just beyond the fence line, they discovered some of his things. They were buried under leaves and brush, stashed like a homeless camp, but far too neat to be accidental. It was a pair of gloves, a bag with snacks, and an empty water bottle. A small notebook with nothing but names. First names mostly, some crossed out and others underlined. Mine was in there, and so was Devin's. They said it wasn't really enough to prove that he had anything criminal or was gonna do anything criminal. No assaults, no violence, no direct threats, just straight up fear. Just a woman with a baby and a bad feeling who happened to be right. We installed a security system as well, and Nico started working from home 3 days a week. I didn't walk anywhere for a really long time. I just kept thinking about how quiet he was, how calculated his movements and what he did was, how he'd gotten so close without even raising his voice or his hand. Honestly, that's the kind of danger people don't really warn you about. The kind that smiles and chats about the weather, that turned so quickly. Devin eventually asked why we didn't walk to school anymore, and I lied, saying the sidewalks were under construction and it wasn't safe. He shrugged and then went back to his cereal. But the truth is, the sidewalks were far from the problem. It's people, and they always will be. I was in college when Tinder really started taking off, back when dating apps still felt like something slightly dangerous and completely addictive. I wouldn't say I was a player or anything like that, but I did have this system. You keep it casual, you talk for about a week, and then if the vibe checks out, you invite them to meet up at one of the local bars that were near campus, places that I knew well, places with noise and the crowd coverage in case the person across the table wasn't who they said they were. I figured it was the safest way to weed through the sea of catfish, the drama queens, and of course the weirdos. And for the most part, my system did work. I met a lot of people that way. Girls with different majors, different styles, different expectations. Now, some of them definitely just wanted free drinks and attention. Others actually clicked with me, but even then it never really truly went anywhere. Maybe it was me, maybe I got bored too easily, or maybe they did. Either way, it was a rinse-repeat routine, and for the time being, I was okay with it, until I matched with Annika. She had this dark, witchy aesthetic in her profile pictures. Long black hair, heavy eyeliner, pale skin that looked like it hadn't seen the sun in years. Now, I'll admit, it's not usually my type, but her captions were clever and sharp. Her humor, it exactly where mine did. Within the first hour of chatting, I realized we had this weird amount in common. Same obscure bands, same guilty pleasure TV shows. She even knew one of the professors that I hated. Honestly, I remember thinking, finally, somebody gets it. We talked for 6 days straight, long threads of messages that went from daylight to midnight. It felt genuine, real, not in like a love at first swipe kind of way, but like we could sit across from each other and just talk. No weird awkward silences or performative nonsense. So on day 7, I invited her to meet up. I gave her the name of the bar that I'd taken almost all of my past matches to, Billy's, on 12th. Lively, lots of regulars, solid fries, and a bartender who knew my name. It was my comfort zone, and I figured if she was anything like our chats, we'd hit it off immediately. I was right about that, but I really had no idea what I was about to walk into. I got to Billy's around 10 minutes early. I always did that, scouted a table near the back and kept my back to the wall. Made sure I had a clear view of the door. Paranoia maybe, call it whatever you want, but I liked being able to leave on my own terms if things turned weird. I ordered a whiskey ginger and sipped at it nice and slow, trying not to overthink things. She really did seem great and normal, and way more engaging than anybody else I'd met on that app, so I told myself, relax. And then she walked in, and yeah, Annika looked even better than her photos on Tinder. Long black hair that curled at the ends, bold lipstick, eyes like polished glass. Her presence was sharp, not just pretty, but electric. Every guy at the bar turned to look at her, and she spotted me right away, smiled like she already knew me, and then glided over in these tall boots that should have made noise, but they didn't. "You always take your dates to this place?" she asked as she sat down. Her voice was smoky, like she smoked a pack before walking in. Not accusing, just curious. I laughed, rubbing at the back of my neck. "Hey, it's a good spot, familiar, and they got decent drinks." She raised an eyebrow. "So I'm not the first then?" Something in her tone made me pause in the moment. I tried to laugh it off again. "Hey, no offense, but that's just kind of the point of dating apps, right?" She didn't smile back. Instead, she leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Amanda, Kaylee, Jess, and the other Amanda? I count at least 10 others." My stomach immediately sank. Those were the most recent women that I brought here over the last 5 months. I stared back at her. How do you even know those names?" She tilted her head, now smirking, but it wasn't warm or inviting. "You left your Instagram link on your profile. You'd be surprised what you can find when you really start looking. You tagged one of your old dates in a story a few months ago, and from there, it wasn't hard to figure out the rest." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I looked around the bar, suddenly aware of how far we were from anybody else. The din of casual conversation did not cover that thudding that was now in my ears. Annika opened up her purse and pulled out a folder. Yeah, a literal folder. She dropped it on the table like it was nothing, flipped it open, and began sliding pages towards me. Photos of my apartment building, my student ID, screenshots of my social media posts, my mom's name, my class schedule, my address, my personal email addresses, even a list of passwords that I used before. "You work in a bookstore, right?" she asked. "Stacks, Tuesdays and Thursdays?" I just found myself nodding and starting to spiral. What the fuck is this? She smiled again. "Oh, just information. That's what you like, right? You talk to people, you figure them out, then you throw them away when you don't have any interest anymore. I thought I'd return the favor." My chest started to crack open from this seriously stressful situation. I was very overwhelmed. I've never hurt anybody. I date like everybody else does. Sometimes it clicks and sometimes they don't. It's not a crime. "No," she said, "but treating people like flies, like data points, that's not human. You're not here for the connection. You're collecting experiences like trophies, and I'm gonna hold you accountable for every single one." I just shook my head. "All right, that's not true. You're definitely twisting this." She shrugged. "I'm the 11th. 5 months, 11 dates. You keep a pattern. You open with the same stupid questions. You go to the same bar. You use the same lines. people tend to notice stuff like that. I tried to remain calm. So what, you've just been stalking me on the app? Not just on the app, she said softly. You matched with me 3 times before this. You just don't remember it, don't realize it. My heart skipped. I've never matched with you before, I said in total disbelief. She gave me this look. You matched with Alice, with Harper, with Jenny. It clicked. The weirdly familiar jokes, the references to stuff that I'd said before, the way it always felt like we were skipping steps. She'd been catfishing me, pretending to be other people, and watching how I treated them, gathering up all this fucking information. I stood up. All right, I'm done here. But she stood up too, really fast, almost like she was about to pounce. You think you're the good guy in this story? She hissed, voice rising. You think you're just some innocent, just swiping through life, playing safe, and playing games while people bleed out emotionally on the other side of that screen? People were turning now, watching us. I raised both hands. You need to calm down. You're a fucking user, she snapped. You collect people, then dump them the second they don't fit into your fantasy. You think just because you're polite about it that it doesn't hurt anybody. The bartender now came over, wearily. Hey, is everything okay here? Annika turned to him, eyes wide and wild. He's a fucking liar, a manipulator. Go ahead, ask him how many girls he's ghosted. I backed away, feeling 20 eyes land on me like stones. Ma'am, the bartender said, I need you to leave. Annika stared at me one last time. You'll see. You'll understand what it's like to be watched, to be studied, to be used. And just like that, she stormed out. The whole bar was dead quiet now, and the bartender looked at me half worried and half disgusted. I paid my tab and left, feeling every person's gaze on my back as I did. I slept like shit that night. I sat at my desk with every light on in my apartment, clicking through old messages, rereading conversations that had long been forgotten, trying to see them the way that she had. Catfish accounts? Probably. All of them. Who knows? I couldn't even tell anymore, and honestly I didn't want to know. By morning, I deleted every dating app off of my phone. Then I nuked my social media next. Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. Changed all my passwords. I pulled down every tag photo that I could. It felt like scrubbing blood from a crime scene that I didn't know I was even a part of. Then, the emails started 2 days later. At first, they came in through burner Gmail accounts, subject lines reading, "Hey player," or "Still out collecting?" I would immediately block them, but more would come. Sometimes just a single sentence. "Still sleeping with one eye open?" One even had a photo attached to it, me leaving class with my headphones in, and a timestamp at the bottom on the same day. I reported everything and I took it immediately to campus security, but of course they couldn't do much. There wasn't a clear threat or evidence that it was even her, just anonymous harassment, a digital shadow that I couldn't shake. And eventually it stopped. 3 weeks of silence with no more emails, no sightings, no new accounts, no screaming matches at the bar, nothing. Like she folded back into whatever digital swamp that she'd crawl out of. And I never saw Annika again. But I still think about her, more than I'd like to admit. Every time somebody new messages me on any platform, I feel that flicker of suspicion. Every time I pass a stranger on campus, every time I hear my name said by somebody that I don't recognize. She turned something casual into something corrosive, made me doubt every connection that I thought was harmless. I don't even date anymore. I haven't for a long time. People ask if it's because of a bad breakup, and I always respond with, yeah, something like that. But the truth is, you don't really understand how visible you are until somebody decides to make a map out of your life, to catalog your behaviors, to turn you into a literal project. I did that in my own way, I guess. Maybe not with bad intentions, but with intentions that don't matter when the result is direct pain. She said some people aren't files, and she was right. She's not a hero, and I'll never forget what it felt like to sit across from somebody who knew everything about me, even without knowing her real name. It was supposed to be this bridge job, just a teaching assistant gig to help cover rent and keep my head above water while finishing my degree. Nothing fancy or too overbearing. I graded papers, prepped basic coursework, and then would run tutoring sessions for students who either missed class or just couldn't seem to keep up with everything. It was really the kind of thing that wears you down slowly if you're not too careful, but I truly didn't mind it, at least not at first. I kept my head down, drank far too much coffee, and tried to play the part of somebody who kept it all together. And that's eventually how I met 𝐷𝐸. He introduced himself using both names as if it was one word. "Hi, 𝐷𝐸," he said, shaking my hand with this weird stiffness. His grip was clammy, and he made this long eye contact that felt more like a dare than an actual greeting. I just chalked it up to social awkwardness. It happens a lot on campus. Gave him the benefit of the doubt, even though something about him definitely wasn't right. He said he needed help understanding this essay prompt, so I told him to stop by on Friday. I had an open time set aside for one-on-one sessions. He thanked me with far too much enthusiasm and walked away without waiting for any kind of response. It was strange, sure, but not completely unheard of. People can be weird inside this academic setting. On that Friday, he never showed. I waited around for 15, maybe 20 minutes before packing up. No email, no cancellation, so I figured it was just another lazy student who didn't actually want help, just wanted the grade to magically fix itself. It happens all the time. But when I got to my car, I found something that really changed everything. There was a note underneath my windshield wiper. Not a sticky note or a folded scrap, an actual packet, 8 pages, handwritten. It started off with this generic apology. "Sorry I couldn't make it." But then it veered into something really bizarre. He wrote about watching me through the window of the building, about how my car didn't match my face, and about how I needed to watch my credit score and keep my blinds down. He even drew a picture of me, like this child sketch, smiling with dead eyes. I immediately tossed it in the trash can near the parking lot and told myself that was it. That's the end of it. Somebody was trolling me, that's all. The week after the windshield note, I started noticing other things. At first, it was really small stuff, like somebody ringing the buzzer on my dorm late at night, then disappearing before I could answer. A new email address showing up in my inbox with a subject line reading, "We need to sync our energy," or "You're not as smart as you think." Always unsigned, always vague, so I figured it was spam. Until I got a message that just said, "You shouldn't have thrown it away." I didn't respond because I wasn't even sure it was him, but in my gut, I knew. I always knew. A few days later, there was another note. This time it was wedged under the professor's door. One single page written in that same loopy scrawl. It said he'd seen me eating in the student union, and that I chew with purpose, whatever the fuck that means. It also mentioned the brand of my socks. That's when I started locking both the office and the dorm door behind me, even during the day. 𝐷𝐸 never came back to tutoring. He didn't even register for office hours again. But the notes, they kept coming, always vague, always intrusive. Once, he left this plastic dinosaur on my windshield, and another time, it was a hairbrush still in its packaging, taped to the dorm door with the words, "For when things get tangled." I don't know what that meant, and I don't think I really wanted to. Then came the blood. It was Friday night. I'd come home after a late session at the campus library, trudging up the stairs to my building when I saw it pooled in the entryway. This dark smear across the floor tiles, still tacky and still red. It looked like at least a quart. At first I thought somebody had gotten hurt, but there was no trail, no struggle, just the pool of blood, perfectly centered. Almost like somebody poured it from a container and then just walked away. I asked around, but my RA hadn't seen anything. The other guys on my floor were as confused as I was. One of them joked that it was probably from the dining hall's mystery meat special. I didn't laugh. I just went back to my room and locked the door. And didn't sleep. I stayed up until sunrise, watching the hall through the peephole anytime I heard any kind of footsteps. The worst part, honestly, was that I couldn't prove that it was Tony Michael, at least not definitively. But who else could it have been? Nobody else was leaving me notes, so there was no way somebody could be pranking me. No one had this kind of insider knowledge except for that creep himself. I told my professor, the one that I assisted. I didn't give him the full story, just that a student was really being strange towards me. He gave me that kind of tired look you only see from somebody who's far too overworked to even care. That all changed 2 days later. He pulled me into his office, shut the door, and said, "Look, I don't know what's going on with you, but it needs to stop." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He held up his phone. "Somebody's been calling my house all hours of the night, leaving these ranting voicemails, threats, screaming, and every time they say it's you." He then played one for me, and a voice I didn't recognize began, distorted and barely holding itself together. It kept repeating my name over and over and accusing the professor of being a part of some kind of conspiracy. "They're using your name, your job, and telling me that I ruined your life?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's not me. I didn't do any of that. I really honestly don't care. Get control of it, or you're out. No references, no work study, no nothing. Do you understand?" I nodded as my heart pounded. That night, I stayed up trying to piece it all together. Tony Michael was now not just writing notes. He was stealing my identity in the creepiest way imaginable, pretending to actually be me, using my information to lash out. Like he thought we were connected in some kind of twisted way. I knew it had to end, and the only way to do that was to catch him in the act, so I decided in the moment I needed to set up some kind of trap. Tony Michael always left me presents in the parking lot behind the Humanities building. That's where I always parked, and that's where I found that first note. I figured he was watching me from somewhere out there, maybe from one of the upper floors or one of the nearby buildings, or even from behind one of the dumpsters where the lighting was bad. Somewhere out of sight. I parked in my usual spot on a Wednesday afternoon, left my doors unlocked, and took a folded note that I'd written, something vague and personal sounding, and tucked it under my windshield wiper. That was the bait. Then I walked out of the lot and looped around the west side of campus, cutting through the buildings until I met up with Patrick, one of the campus security guards. I knew him from my shift at the library. He was built like a brick shithouse and had a temper when provoked. He was also cool and a friendly dude that offered to assist me once I explained my situation. "You really think he's gonna take that?" Patrick asked, peeking through one of the blinds of the supply room that overlooked the parking lot. "I know he can't help himself. He wants to be seen. He just doesn't want to be caught, you know?" So we waited. 30 minutes passed and then 40. Then out of nowhere, Patrick nudged me. "Hey, look." Tony Michael comes creeping out from behind two parked cars. But what made my stomach turn wasn't that he actually showed up, it's how he looked. He was wearing a child's outfit. I'm talking overalls and a shirt that was far too small, with a cartoon rocket ship on it and a plastic baseball cap that barely even fit his adult head. He looked like somebody trying to impersonate a 6-year-old after watching far too many cartoons. He walked over with this stiff shuffle, head swiveling from side to side like he was on a playground, looking at all the equipment. All he was missing to complete this outfit was a giant lollipop. He reached my car and grabbed the note, unfolded it right there, reading it like it was a letter from Santa. Patrick didn't wait. He was already on the radio.
This is Patrick. West Lot. Got the suspect requesting some kind of backup now.
He burst out the door and down the stairs, crossed the lot in these wide, fast strides.
Hey, you! Stop right there!
𝐃𝐨𝐽 looked up, startled like a deer about to be hit. He clutched the note to his chest and hissed. Actually hissed. Then without warning, he charged. I stayed in that little office room watching it all go down in total shock. Patrick braced himself, hands up, but 𝐃𝐨𝐽 slammed into him with this wild, inhuman scream, clawing at his face, both hands scratching, biting, and swinging. Patrick went down hard, yelling. I sprinted out, yelling for help, but by the time I reached them, 𝐃𝐨𝐽 was already up and running, darting between the cars like a rodent, vanishing before backup could actually reach the lot. Patrick sat up, bleeding from the cheek, one eye already swelling shut. Son of a fucking bitch, he spat. Motherfucker scratched one of my eyes. I helped him up, heart thundering. The next few days were a blur of statements, meeting with security and long conversations with the dean's office. When they cross-referenced 𝐃𝐨𝐽's name with the student database, nothing came up. No enrollments, no records. He was not a student, probably had never been, just a random-ass prowler. After that, though, everything changed. The university tightened up on security and made it a lot harder for just anybody to wander on campus. They posted flyers asking for information, but of course, nobody came forward. Not a single person claimed to know who the hell 𝐃𝐨𝐽 was. Not from class, not from the dorms, not from the library or cafeteria. It was like he'd been a ghost, just some adult pretending to be a student, slipping through the cracks that were far too wide to begin with. Patrick ended up with 12 stitches across his face. One of them just missed his eye by a millimeter. He never complained or blamed me, but I saw the way he looked at me afterward, like I'd been the bait in something way bigger than either of us even understood. They pulled me from that TA position quietly and told me it was for my safety. I told them I understood, and my professor never looked at me in the eyes again. I changed my routines, parked somewhere new almost every single day, switched dorm rooms, and even started carrying a pocket knife. Not because I thought it would help, but because I just needed something. Anything to make me feel a little less helpless. Every time I passed a building with tinted windows, I would catch myself checking the reflections. Every time I heard footsteps behind me, I would flinch. I never saw 𝐃𝐨𝐽 again, and the police took my statements. The security team filed a report, but with no full name or student record and no real crime, what could they pin on him? Nothing they could prosecute with, or really, there was nothing they could do. No fingerprints on the note, no camera footage clear enough to help them out, so it ended up just being stories and scars, a lingering question mark for all of us. Honestly, I think what scared me the most was not that he came after me, but that he could do it again. To somebody else if it wasn't me, somewhere else. Just slip into a new routine, a new face, a new parking lot. Still to this day, I have no idea what the hell he wanted. Recognition, control, attention? All I know is this, 𝐃𝐨𝐽 all but destroyed my college career. And this was one of the last times I ever voluntarily helped out a stranger. If you're reading this, watch yourself out there.